Massive mining trucks just rolled into Burkina Faso. Gold production is exploding. The government has seized control of key mines. Farmers are suddenly receiving millions in equipment. Something big is happening in this quiet West African nation, and almost no one is talking about it. Is this the birth of Africa's next economic powerhouse? Let's find out.
What if one of the poorest countries in the world quietly rewrote its destiny, and almost no one noticed? That's exactly what's unfolding in Burkina Faso. Far from headlines and without foreign fanfare, the landlocked West African nation is carrying out an economic transformation that's beginning to reshape its future, powered not by foreign aid, but by its own gold, and a new kind of leadership that isn't asking permission. In early 2025, something unusual happened. A fleet of massive industrial mining trucks rolled into Burkina Faso under heavy security. But these weren't just big machines. They were symbols of a deeper shift. Autonomous drilling rigs, high-capacity crushers, and satellite-linked monitoring systems began replacing the hand tools and unstable contracts that once defined Burkina's gold sector. This wasn't just an upgrade. It was an industrial leap, and it marked the beginning of a silent revolution. Within weeks, two major foreign mining companies, Australia's West African Resources and Seoul Resources International, announced accelerated timelines for production. The numbers followed. By year-end, Burkina Faso's gold output was set to reach nearly 56 metric tons, locking in its place as Africa's fourth-largest gold producer. But those numbers only tell part of the story. On June 12, 2025, the government completed something that many thought would take years, or never happen at all. It formally nationalized 5 major gold mines. These weren't run-down pits or idle operations. They were profitable, revenue-generating mines previously owned and operated by foreign firms. Now the state-controlled company SOPAMIB holds the reins. There were no big announcements, no international negotiations, no compensation packages. It just happened, quietly, but with purpose. Then came the money moves. Within months, $179 million from the newly nationalized mines was redirected, not to foreign consultants or flashy urban projects, but to farmers. Across provinces, communities began receiving brand new tractors, irrigation kits, harvesters, and storage systems. Not loans, not rentals. State-provided assets. In many villages, it was the first time anyone had ever seen a mechanized tool on their farm. This is where Burkina Faso's story veers off the usual path, because while many African nations produce wealth for export, few ever see that wealth translated into local prosperity. Here, the government is flipping that script. The services sector, once an afterthought, has become the fastest-growing slice of the economy, even outpacing mining and agriculture. Public administration, transportation, retail, and repair services are all booming. Infrastructure repairs are being made, local wages are climbing, businesses that were shuttered are reopening. The national GDP growth rate hit 4.9% in 2024, up from 3.0% just the year before. More importantly, the extreme poverty rate dropped to 23.2%, with rural and marginalized areas seeing the biggest improvements. And here's what makes it all more remarkable. There's no IMF program. No Western donors calling the shots. No press releases from Washington or Paris. This is a homegrown development strategy, funded by Burkinabe Gold, directed by Burkinabe leaders, and rolled out on Burkinabe terms. For decades, the country's gold flowed out, but the people remained poor. Today, for the first time, the gold is staying and working for the people. But it's not just about infrastructure and numbers. It's about power. Who controls the economy? Who decides what gets built? Who benefits? That's why the creation of SOPAMIB, the Société de Participation Minière du Burkina, matters. It's not just another state-owned company. It's a strategic arm of the government, designed to take back control over a sector that for years was in foreign hands. SOPAMIB didn't stop at taking over mines. It pushed through new local content laws, requiring mining companies to source their labor, tools, and materials from inside the country. This didn't just boost national pride. It jump-started entirely new industries. Mechanic shops, catering services, logistics hubs, these are now springing up near mining sites, all run by locals. Vocational centers are training welders, engineers, and safety technicians. The mining sector is no longer a fenced-off enclave. It's becoming an engine that powers the broader economy. Even the informal gold mining sector, long dominated by shadow networks, has been brought under state control. Through registration drives and mobile buying centers, previously invisible artisanal miners are now operating in the open. They're taxed, tracked, and, most importantly, recognized. Foreign investors? They haven't been pushed out entirely, but the rules have changed. Joint ventures are now the model of choice. Companies can operate, but only in partnership with the state. Majority control stays in Burkina Faso, and that means so do the profits, the decisions, and the long-term planning. Some investors have raised concerns, but many are adapting. With clear regulations, reduced risk of expropriation, and guaranteed reinvestment into local economies, the new rules are becoming a workable, if unfamiliar, landscape. And the reforms are more than just policy. They're visible. Satellite images now show expanded mine pits, new roadways, and growing industrial zones. Engineers once employed by multinationals are now working for the state, running surveys, leading construction, managing projects. What makes this all possible is not ideology, but structure. Sopa-Maibi isn't built on slogans. It has auditing mechanisms, profit-sharing rules, and mandated community reinvestment. Money doesn't just get logged in Ouagadougou. It flows to the provinces, where it's used to build schools, dig wells, and fund cooperatives. In short, the gold isn't vanishing into offshore accounts. It's building things you can actually see. But here's where things get even more interesting. The government didn't stop at gold. They started turning that gold into something much more powerful. Food. Burkina Faso is doing something few thought possible. It's turning gold into food. And not through abstract promises or symbolic gestures, but with tractors in the fields, irrigation pumps in the villages, and real, measurable change in the lives of farmers who had long been forgotten. In a country where agriculture has always employed the majority of the population, farming was rarely a path out of poverty. It was a means of survival. Harvests rose and fell with the rains. Tools were basic, irrigation was rare, and when farmers did produce a surplus, they often had nowhere to sell it. For decades, agriculture was seen as a burden, a sector too large to ignore, but too broken to fix. That changed in early 2025. Armed with newfound gold revenue, nearly $179 million from nationalized mines, the Burkina government did something bold. It didn't send the money abroad. It didn't pile it into elite infrastructure projects in the capital. It sent it to the soil. Thousands of farming families across dozens of provinces began receiving modern agricultural machinery. Tractors, threshers, irrigation pumps, grain storage systems. And this wasn't charity. It wasn't a loan. These were direct state investments, free of the red tape that usually comes with donor-funded aid. For many farmers, it was the first time they had ever driven a machine, seen controlled water flow to their crops, or stored grain beyond a single harvest cycle. But the government didn't stop at handing over equipment. It rolled out training programs through local extension offices. Farmers weren't just given tools. They were taught how to use and maintain them. Workshops popped up in remote towns. Technicians showed up in villages. Entire cooperatives were brought into the fold and supported to manage the distribution and upkeep of the new equipment. It was, for the first time in generations, an agricultural reform that respected farmers as professionals, not just survivors. Fields once tilled by hand were now plowed in hours. Entire plots of abandoned land, once too remote or too dry, were reclaimed and cultivated. Water scarcity, long the Achilles heel of Burkina farming, was suddenly manageable thanks to a network of small-scale irrigation systems. With water control, yields rose. And with yields came optimism. The impact was visible. Agricultural output spiked. Agriculture contributed 1.6 percentage points to GDP growth in 2024, a rare feat for a sector so often at the mercy of nature. Rural employment surged. Food prices stabilized. And the fastest drop in extreme poverty? It wasn't in the cities. It was in farming communities. But the most powerful shift wasn't economic. It was psychological. For decades, the rural population felt invisible, used during elections, forgotten afterward. Development often meant glossy reports written far away, not real change on the ground. But now, with gold money flowing into their fields, farmers were starting to feel something deeper. Trust. They were being seen. They were no longer waiting on foreign NGOs to arrive with seeds or handouts. They were being equipped by their own government to grow, to lead, and to build. And in that act of choosing to trust farmers with the wealth of the land, something rare happened. The state and its people began to reconnect. In regions where coups and violence often fester in the shadows of state neglect, this mattered. Rural communities weren't just getting tools. They were getting a stake in the future. In a place where marginalization had often bred instability, investment was breeding resilience. And the results went far beyond farming. With more cash in rural areas, local economies lit up. Small shops reopened, market stalls expanded. New demands for transport, storage, and packaging created spin-off businesses. Farmers who had once scraped by selling a few sacks of grain were now hiring labor, investing in solar panels, sending their children to school. This was no longer about food. This was about dignity. It's also about independence. Unlike many African agricultural programs backed by international lenders or donors, this one is fully funded by Burkina Faso's own gold revenues. That means there are no strings attached, no austerity conditions, no foreign benchmarks, just a clear local agenda. Use extractive wealth to build productive power. In doing so, Burkina Faso is building more than food security. It's building sovereignty, economic, political, and psychological. But even as the countryside transformed, another force was rising, quietly, in the background, faster than farming and more widespread than mining. And it was happening in the towns and cities, where things didn't glitter or grow, but moved. It was the rise of the services sector. In 2024, public administration, logistics, communication, finance, and trade made up the largest single driver of GDP growth, contributing 2.6 percentage points, even more than mining or agriculture. These gains didn't come from nowhere. They came from ripple effects. When farmers have more money, they buy more. When the state has more fiscal space, it hires more, builds more, and spends more. When gold is turned into infrastructure, markets open, roads improve, and businesses bloom. Take transportation. With new roads built to connect mines and farming regions, logistics boomed. Not just for big trucks and long hauls, but for everything in between. Motorbike delivery services, local warehousing, repair shops. Suddenly, young people who once fled villages for uncertain lives in the capital were returning home to new jobs and staying. Retail followed. With more money flowing through rural towns and peri-urban neighborhoods, demand for goods surged. Mobile phones, cooking supplies, household items, informal kiosks turned into registered businesses. Tax systems modernized. A shadow economy started stepping into the light. Repair services, long overlooked, are experiencing a revival. More machines mean more breakdowns. And more breakdowns mean a growing need for skilled workers. The government, seeing this trend, began expanding vocational training to meet the demand. Welders, mechanics, technicians, all gaining new relevance in this changing economy. But what ties it all together, mining, farming, services, is a simple idea. Keep the value inside. For decades, Burkina Faso exported raw materials and imported solutions. Now, it's building a loop where the gold stays home, the food grows here, and the money circulates among its own people. Still, this model is young, it's growing fast, and it's not without risks. Every engine, no matter how powerful, comes with pressure points. Burkina Faso is rising. That much is clear. The gold is staying home. Farmers are thriving. Cities are pulsing with new energy. On paper, it reads like a rare success story. A nation reclaiming its wealth, rebuilding its economy, and doing it all without Western permission or direction. But every transformation comes with tension. Behind the rising GDP and the new tractors, there are cracks, some visible, some buried deep. And if they're not handled carefully, they could split everything wide open. The first and most urgent threat is security. While mining corridors and some urban centers have seen relative calm, large swaths of northern and eastern Burkina Faso remain unstable. Armed insurgent groups are still active. Attacks on transport routes haven't stopped entirely. Some development projects have been suspended. In certain provinces, schools remain closed. Civilians are still displaced. The state is responding, with more troops, more surveillance, and a growing focus on civic outreach. But unless these regions are fully stabilized, there's a real risk that this boom becomes regionally uneven. That resentment festers. That growth becomes a privilege for the safe, not a right for all. And in a country with a history of political volatility, uneven growth isn't just a development issue, it's a national security threat. The second pressure point is investor uncertainty. Nationalizing 5 major mines won broad support among citizens, but it also sent shockwaves through the global investment community. Some foreign companies are now holding back. Exploration licenses are on pause. Boards are waiting to see what happens next. Even though the government has kept the door open through joint venture models, questions remain. How are disputes resolved? What happens in a downturn? Can private capital still make long-term plans? Burkina Faso is walking a tightrope. Maintain sovereignty without scaring off innovation. It's a difficult balance. And one misstep, just one, could choke the flow of technology, capital, and global partnerships the country still needs. Then there's institutional strain. The state has moved fast. In 2 years, it scaled programs, absorbed assets, and decentralized funds. That speed has created pressure, especially at the local level. Some district offices are now managing budgets 10 times larger than what they handled just 3 years ago. In many places, the capacity just isn't there yet. Civil servants are overwhelmed. Procurement processes are messy. Transparency tools have been launched, but systems take time to mature. If oversight fails or corruption creeps in, public trust could evaporate. And trust is the invisible currency keeping this new economy together. The fourth challenge is climate volatility. 2024 was a year of good rains. The fields responded. But there are no guarantees. Burkina Faso sits in the Sahel, one of the most climate-vulnerable regions on Earth. Droughts, erratic rainfall, and shifting seasons are already a reality. Mechanization has helped, but machines need water. So do people. The country has made bold moves, investing in irrigation, seed resilience, and water storage. But one climate shock could wipe out gains in both agriculture and food security. And that brings us to the fifth pressure point: geopolitical alignment. Burkina Faso's decision to turn away from Western aid structures hasn't gone unnoticed. There are fewer photo ops with international agencies, fewer IMF delegations. The country has chosen to go it alone, or at least to chart a different course. And that creates tension. Multilateral institutions, donor states, and diplomatic partners are all watching, some with concern, others with quiet frustration. The Burkinabe government must now manage its independence while preserving the strategic relationships that still matter. Relationships that provide essential imports, military support, and financing for key infrastructure. There's a final risk worth mentioning, and it's harder to measure. Momentum. In this kind of transformation, belief plays a huge role. People believe in the future, so they invest. Farmers work harder. Businesses open. Youth stay home instead of migrating. But if that belief fades, if delivery slows, if projects stall, if the state starts to feel distant again, the momentum can disappear. And once it's gone, it's hard to bring back. So what does all this mean? It means that Burkina Faso is not just building an economy, it's building a system, a new way of doing development, one rooted in control, discipline, and domestic value. It's messy, it's risky, and it's absolutely fragile. But it's also working. Because for now, the numbers aren't lies. GDP is growing, poverty is falling, confidence is rising. And perhaps most importantly, the people are no longer watching from the sidelines. They're in the story now. Farmers, miners, engineers, teachers, mechanics, youth. They're not waiting for help to arrive. They are the help. And that's what makes Burkina Faso's story different. It's not about aid. It's not about hope. It's about action. A nation once defined by extraction is now building inclusion. A people once excluded from wealth are now shaping its direction. And a government once seen as weak is now holding a model that other nations are beginning to watch, and maybe even envy. But the big question still hangs in the air. Can it last? Can anything stop this? Time will tell. For now, the trucks are still rolling. The gold is still flowing. The fields are blooming. And something powerful is growing. Not just in the ground, but in the people. The world may not be paying attention yet, but maybe they should be. What do you think? Is Burkina Faso's model sustainable, or is it moving too fast? Let us know in the comments below. If you believe stories like this deserve more attention, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We're here to bring you untold stories about Black culture, strength, history, and progress, without the noise. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.